Ahri is a staple pick in most mid laners' champion pool, and for good reason. She functions really well as a ranged lane bully that brings a lot more to the table. Her Q is such a fantastic ability for lane phase. It allows her to stay topped off with the passive as well as shove the lane quickly whenever she needs to. The true damage also makes it scale really well into the late game once more people have magic resist. Her ultimate paired with her charm also makes it so she has immense pick potential in the mid and late game, so she doesn't even fall off. This is what makes Ahri the jack of all trades when it comes to mid lane. You can look to survive lane phase if you need to, you can look to dominate the lane, you can look to pick mid game, or you can look to play a more sustained damage build. She can do all of this. This is compounded by the fact that she has multiple different rune sets that work really well with her kit. If you're a player that likes to play with their team and pick out enemy champions, then you can go more of a Glacial build, or if you're a player that likes to 1v9 solo carry every game, then you can go for Electrocute. The versatility offered by this champion is nearly endless, and even though she has a few counter picks, she can just survive the lane phase if she's playing against those. If you haven't already, check out our website, GameLeap.com. There, we have hundreds of guides just like this one sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses like this one. If that's something that interests you, then sign up with a link below. Now in the early laning phase, you're mostly just going to be wanting to look to chill out. Ahri's trades don't really start coming together until level 3 or 4, so a lot of champions will be able to outtrade her in early levels. The advantage that Ahri does have on most champions in the early levels is her shove potential. A lot of the time, you're just going to be taking Q level 1 and shoving the wave with it. If the enemy tries to contest your shove, you can trade them with auto attacks. This is perfectly fine for Ahri to do due to the passive on her Q giving her sustain. Once you have the passive fully stacked to 9 stacks, your next ability is going to heal for however many targets it hits. Using your fully stacked passive paired with another Q on a grouped cannon wave can heal you an immense amount. It makes it so that most champions just cannot match your sustain in the laning phase. While Ahri does not excel in extended trades early on into the game, she's almost unmatched in short trades. Again, this is because of her passive. Even short trades like auto WQ proccing Electrocute will outtrade most people, even if they proc the same amount of damage on you. The Q passive is just so strong for laning phase and allows you to bully out most champions. You can also use her actual passive to kite out of a fight. Just an auto attack and a W will proc the movement speed, allowing you to escape if you need to. It's a very good disengage tool, especially early on into the game where a lot of champions' mobility is going to be lacking. In order to master your laning phase on Ahri, you need to be mastering these 2 passives. Keep yourself safe and away from the enemy champion using your passive, and keep yourself topped off using the passive on your Q. Doing this will allow you to save charm for ganks. Typically, you're only going to be using charm in the early game if you're doing an all-in. While this is definitely doable if you are able to poke down the enemy champion low enough to perform an all-in, a lot of the time you won't be seeing charm usage unless a gank occurs. If your jungler is ganking for you, then you can use charm to set up an early kill. If you're the one being ganked, however, then you can use charm on the enemy. This will allow you to escape during the CC duration and prevent unnecessary deaths in the laning phase before you unlock your ultimate. Once you do have your ultimate leveled, your laning phase is significantly safer. This will allow you to play much more aggressive and in the enemy's face. The biggest mistake that I see people making on Ahri is deaths before 6. These need to not happen, and if they are happening to you, you need to find a way to make them stop happening. If the enemy champion is unable to get a lead pre-6, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to get a lead on you after level 6. This is because at level 6, Ahri's shove potential is really good. This allows her to either roam or poke the enemy champion under the tower. Ahri's roams after level 6 are very potent. This is because she has one of the best gap closures in the game with her ultimate. This paired with her charm can guarantee kills on overextended targets really easily. If you are opting to play Glacial Augment Ahri, then your pick potential only goes up the later the game goes. Hextech GLP and Spooky Ghosts paired with Glacial Augment's laser make it so that you can hit almost any charm. Any target that doesn't have flash or any mobility will almost be guaranteed to die because of this. This is why I heavily recommend Glacial Augment Ahri over Electrocute Ahri. While Electrocute Ahri is good and still can solo carry, the game is in more of a team play meta. It's oftentimes much more beneficial to you to just play with your team, get picks, and close out the game early. Dealing damage is not the only aspect of the game, and while Electrocute Ahri does excel at that, that, it is not nearly as good at picking enemy champions. Now, just because Glacial Ahri does excel at grouping with your team and picking out enemy champions does not mean that you should perma-group with your team. Please do not do this. You are a solo laner, and as a result, you need to be getting solo EXP. If you're only staying grouped with your team, everyone on your team is going to be lower level, and you're just going to lower your chances to win. You'll know when the proper time to group is because you'll be looking to pick out in order to make an objective like Dragon or Baron happen. If you do not have a real objective in mind, then it is better to just stay in the side lane and continue to farm and scale up. I can't count how many times I've seen Glacial Ahri players just perma-group with their team and quickly become useless. Playing like this will cause one of two things to happen. Either you will be relegated to a secondary support, or your ADC is going to be unable to farm due to the fact that you're taking all of the farm. If you are lacking in this department and you find yourself grouping with your team way too often, then try and build your discipline in staying in the side lane. You will know that you're grouping way too much if you commonly find yourself down a few levels on the enemy mid laner. If you do find this happening to you, then ask yourself this question while you are grouping. Are we looking to pick out an enemy champion for Baron, or are we looking to siege right now? If the answer is no, then you should be in the side lane looking to get farm and solo EXP. If you want, you can take TP on Ahri, which will allow you to side lane significantly better. Now, I do quickly want to go over the two builds and why they are so good, and some common mistakes that I see with each of these builds. Now, first we're going to take a look at the Glacial Augment build, and this is the build that I recommend that you run in about 70% of cases. In my opinion, the only time that you should not be running Glacial Augment build is if they are playing hypermobile champions like Camille and Riven. Glacial Augment doesn't really do anything to champions with a lot of dashes, so in that case, you should be running Electrocute instead. Against an immobile team, however, Glacial Augment just takes the cake. The pick potential is just way too good to pass up on in the vast majority of your games, so you should be taking it in the vast majority of your games. You're going to be taking Glacial Augment paired with Magical Footwear, Minion Dematerializer, and Cosmic Insight. Your secondary tree is going to be Domination with either Cheap Shot or Taste of Blood and Ingenious Hunter. A lot of the time I see people taking Biscuits over Minion Demats, and this will lower your shove potential, especially early on into the game. Remember, Glacial Ahri is all about picking out the enemy team, so the faster you can shove the wave, the quicker you can get to a side lane and help your team out. The other big mistake that I see people making with this page is they take Ultimate Hunter over Ingenious Hunter. With this build, your ultimate is more of a defensive tool. You want as many Ingenious Hunter stacks so that you can have as much uptime on your Spooky Ghosts and your Hextech GLP as possible. For your Rune Shards, I recommend taking 2 adaptives and whatever resist that you need. With this build, I do recommend taking 3 starting items. Start the game out with a Corrupting Pot, and then on your first back, look to get a Dark Seal and a Doran's Ring. This will make it so that you can shove endless waves and you'll never run out of mana. And if you take a poor trade, you can heal up using your passive and your Corrupting Pot. With this build, you don't want to heavily trade into the enemy mid laner because they're most likely going to be having a damage keystone while you won't. For this reason, shoving, sustaining, and roaming are your main priorities with this build. After your starting items, you're going to want to look for a Lost Chapter into a Hextech GLP. After your Hextech GLP, you're going to be wanting to get Spooky Ghosts. Pretty much any other item can fit into this build. You're going to be primarily looking at Morellonomicon, Deathcap, Void Staff, and then either Zhonya's or Banshee's Veil for defensive items. It will heavily vary from game to game. Some games you'll need a Zhonya's and a Banshee's Veil, whereas some games you'll be opting for a Morellonomicon and a Deathcap. Really, it's up to player preference. The only core items in this build are Hextech GLP and Spooky Ghosts. Now, moving on to the Electrocute build, and this is what you're going to be running in those high mobility games. Now, I do heavily recommend only taking Flash and Ignite if you are going to be running this page. I don't think taking defensive summoner spells are good if you're going to be running this page, and I don't think that taking TP is going to be good either. Your secondary rune choices ultimately are going to be up to player preference, but I would highly recommend taking Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, and Ravenous Hunter. For secondary rune tree, you can either take Inspiration or Sorcery second. With the Inspiration secondary, you're going to be looking at Magical Footwear paired with either Biscuit Delivery or Minion Dematerializers. Biscuit Delivery will help you with hard trades early on into the laning phase. Since you aren't starting 3 starting items with this build, you're going to be having a lot less sustain. You're also going to be trading much more heavily with this page, so you'll be taking a lot more damage. therefore you will need a lot more sustain. Biscuit delivery can definitely help with that. I would not recommend running minion DMATs quite as much with this page, simply because you're not just looking to shove in, you're looking to trade a lot more often. If you are running Sorcery second, then you can take Mana Flow Band and Transcendence, or Transcendence and Gathering Storm. If you find that you're running out of mana a lot, then Mana Flow Band is really good for you, but if not, then Gathering Storm is really good to secure your late game. The build for this one is super straightforward. You're going to want to look for an early lost chapter into Ludens, Morellonomicon, Deathcap, Void Staff, and then Zonia's or Banshee's Veil. Your boots should be either Merc Treads or Sorc Shoes, and finish those whenever possible. With the Electrocute rune page, you do want to be significantly more aggressive in lane phase, like I've said before. You can look to poke the enemy champion down in the early lane phase if you want, and look for a kill at level 5, but I think it's still better to just play the early lane safe and wait for your level 6. One of my favorite things to do on Electrocute Ahri is to roam into the enemy jungler and kill the enemy jungler. You're usually able to do this pretty uncontested because a lot of champions do have a hard time matching your shove. With this build, you are going to be grouping with your team significantly less. You want to be getting as much solo gold and EXP as possible before grouping with your team, forcing a team fight, and looking to end the game. With this build, you are going to be looking to use your ultimate a little bit more aggressive. However, it's still mostly going to be used just to reposition. You want to get yourself in a good position in the fight in order to hit Q and Charm on a priority target without putting yourself in danger of dying. Teamfighting with this build is significantly harder than it is with the Glacial augment build because you do have to play so much closer to a teamfight with it. If you have been enjoying all of our content lately, make sure to check out our website GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides all done by challenger players, and we are constantly adding new ones. We have guides on both the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific guides, so if you haven't already, be sure to check it out using the link below. As always, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.